Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, so first, based on the instruction, I went in the Flask folder, right?
Mhm.
In the specific location, I created a folder through terminal, and then I typed this in the pip3 install pip nev, right?
Okay. Mhm.
Yeah, and now I think it says I need to update, right? Upgrade, but I
Yeah.
couldn't find this this path, so to go and upgrade that.
Yeah, so this is just your pip. And so pip is going to be a package installer that we use. You will get this all the time. This is something you should not worry about here where it says, you know, this you're using 2.21 point blah, blah, and there's 21.2, that's fine. If you were on like version 9 and then there was version 21, that'd be an issue, but pip is something that you're totally fine. What you could do if you wanted to, you should consider upgrading. You could either, what you could do is just copy and paste this entire thing and run it, and that'll update it if you wanted to. It's not necessary. You're totally fine right now, but excluding the excluding the quotations, you could just do that if you wanted, and that'll upgrade your pip. But again, 21.1.3 versus 21.2.4, those are so minuscule that you should be totally fine. So that's just like a warning, a deprecation warning that, or not a deprecation warning, but a warning that will often you will see, which is like, I think I have that warning and it's totally fine. Just don't forget the / in library, so you can copy and paste, but put a / and then paste.
Slash and then
Yep,
paste.
and then there we go. Now press enter. There you go. So now you're just uninstalling and then installing the new one. So now you're good to go.
Now, to see if it's activated based on this instruction we have, I need to say pip nev shell.
So one thing we haven't done, that's pip env, so it's just a pip environment. But one thing we haven't done, if you scroll up a little bit, keep scrolling for me. Keep scrolling. Okay, let's stop right here. Let's go back to my code. Let's go down just a little bit. So creating a virtual environment.
Here?
Yeah, let's scroll down just a bit for me. Other way, sorry. I want to see all of this blue box.
Sure.
Okay, perfect. Now let's go back to our code. So this pip is going to be our package installer. It's going to be a way that we can kind of control what we are installing. If I want to see what have I currently installed, what I would type is pip, so pip space list. And then get rid of the E, so it's just pip. Usually you can't on a Mac. Yeah, you're gonna have to go. Another way you could have done it is if you press Option and then to the left, it'll actually skip each word on a Mac.
Oh, awesome.
But yeah, so click that, just press enter. And so by default, this is what you have. When you downloaded pip env, it downloaded all of this stuff right here, right?
Yep.
Great. So now what I need to do is, let's go back to the Learn platform.
To the top?
The Learn platform, sorry. The student platform. And making sure that do you have like a Flask folder, and then within that you have another folder called fundamentals, or do you have it, how do you have it all set up from a folder structure perspective?
Can I show that in the terminal?
Yeah, you can show me that.
Okay, so
you can do pwd. Yeah, great job.
Yeah,
so cool. So within Flask, we've got a fundamentals. So let's go ahead and cd into Hello Flask. Now this is going to be very important. Perfect. So now we're in Hello Flask. Every time we do this, what I'm about to show you, every time we do this, we want to make sure we're in our folder that has our project, not our parent folder. If we do it in our parent folder, it can kind of mess up some things and get very confusing. So we want to make sure that we are in our actual project folder. Perfect. Now let's go back to the Learn platform. Great. So in here, you see this pip env install Flask right there?
Yes.
I want you to run that.
Okay.
So let's go back. It's not there. It's not on the It's
Oh,
not on the actual platform. Yeah, I've asked for that to be put there because I feel like
okay.
that's confusing for students as well. So you just type pip env. So yep, env en. Yeah. So you're saying for this environment, and then you want to space install space Flask, lowercase f. And so what you are doing is you're saying for this environment, I want to install the micro framework that we call Flask. So go ahead and press enter. It's going to download Flask. It's going to make sure successfully created virtual environment. Awesome. Installing dependencies. Okay. So now let's type pip list. Awesome. And so now don't see Flask in your, will you scroll up a little bit? Don't see. Scroll up just a little bit more for me. Installing Flask, adding Flask. Okay, so it did install it. I'm not sure. Scroll down just for me one more time.
How about if you type pipnev shell to see if it's activated or not, just for the check?
I can, well, so I'm looking at mine and I absolutely have Flask in there. So that's why I'm confused. So mine looks the same way. It just has Flask. So let's see. Let's go back to where you ran pip install Flask. Pip env install Flask. Scroll down. I'm not sure why it's not showing. Adding Flask installation succeeded. I'm just sorry. You can go ahead and stop right there. I'm saying because it's saying the exact same things. Keep scrolling down for me. It's saying the exact same things as mine. It's not showing it, but it's showing that it worked, which is odd. So let's scroll down. And let's just test it. Let's keep scrolling. And let's do pip env. Env. Oh, that's why, sorry. So do pip env and then do shell. There we go. So what's happening? Yeah, go ahead and run that. And then now say pip list. Sorry about that. Now we have Flask. Okay. Sorry, I forgot that we hadn't yet activated it. So now in my environment, I've got Flask, and then the other big one is going to be Jinja 2. That's something that we're going to be using in WorkZoog and and it's dangerous. It's kind of a built-in thing for Flask. But now you can see not only do I have Flask, and remember the reason it is we had to go into my pip env is because we did pip env install Flask. And so we were installing it to the environment. So I have to actually activate it. And you can tell that it's activated because now it's got this name right here, right? Compared to when you didn't have that, this is your environment name, right?
Correct.
And so within this environment, you've got Flask. And so now everything is good to go. So if you have code in your hello Flask, if you have a server PY, then we can run any Flask material because now Flask is downloaded. Also,
awesome.
Whenever you did download Flask, it does Jinja, it does quite a few things as well. So it installed all that for you. So you're good to go.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah,
and
of course.
For the exit, we just need to type exit.
Yep. Perfect. Yep. And you can see now, once you exited, that hello Flask is no longer here. right? That means you're
Right.
like this. That's no longer there, which means you're out of your shell. Yeah.
So for going inside, we need to type pip list, right? Or no?
For going inside, you type pip env shell.
Awesome.
There you go. And you want to make sure whenever you do pip env shell, you don't just randomly do it anywhere else. You have to make sure you are navigated where you actually did that, right? Which is my hello Flask. Because why don't you just do open?
Open.
Mm-hmm.
So first,
Just type,
how about if I go
yeah.
cd,
Or even just type ls for me.
ls.
Uh-huh.
Okay, so now I should make it.
Let's go back. Yeah.
And here.
Yeah. And remember, you can do Python and then press tab, and then you can actually keep, if you know the pathway. So if you know that it's Coding Dojo / Python, you can just keep typing
inside the Flask, right? So
yeah,
cd.
so you can, yep, and then press tab.
Oops.
Yep, and then press tab, and then keep typing. So say hello world.
What is that?
Right here. Yep, and then press tab. Oh, what did you call it? Tab. If you press tab with nothing in there, it'll show you what's in the fundamentals. Okay, and then there you go. Now press enter. Now, why don't you do ls and see what's in there? And so now, because we did our environment within our hello Flask, we get these two files here, this pip lock and this pip file, right? This is something that is generated when we create it. So we want to make sure that when we are activating our environment, these are important, right? It gives a list of what are basically some of our dependencies. And so I can't just do pip env within my desktop, right? I've got to actually navigate where these files are and make sure that all is good to go. And then I can say, now we're navigated in. I can say, if I wanted to, you currently already have it open, but if I wanted to open my environment, I would just say pip env shell, but you already have it. So you can say exit.
Exit.
Yeah, because you can see right here, your shell is already, your environment's already activated.
All right.
Make sense?
Makes sense.
Perfect. Great. Good job. Yep. Anybody else have any other questions? And we can still see your screen. It's okay if you still want that. I just want to make sure that you knew.
Okay, I've got a question about this whole virtual environment thing.
Okay.
So I'm guessing it's each virtual environment that you create, the packages that you install on there are, I guess, separate from everything else. That's what I'm kind of getting at.
Yeah.
So that when you do pip env install, is that equivalent to just doing I guess pip install but on a localized level, where pip install would be global and pip env install is just that?
Correct. Yeah.
Okay.
100%. So if you just do pip install Flask, that'll be globally installing Flask. But we want to make sure that we contain it into an environment. Just that way we're not either messing up dependencies or we're not just packaging things that we don't need to package. The way I put it, and then you're going to get this entire spiel whenever we have class, is I like to think about it. There's different types of hikes, right? Like you can hike in different areas, but I'm not going to have just one backpack that I take for every hike I do. Because if I hike in Sedona, Arizona in the winter, right? And I hike Mount Rainier in Seattle, which has snow at the top, those are going to require different things. right? Mount Rainier, I might need to have a bit different, like a thick jacket, or if I'm doing Everest, let's say, I might need a thick jacket. I might need different aspects versus Sedona. I might need some sunscreen. I definitely need sunscreen. I'm going to need some different water, maybe some different things, right? And so with the different hikes, I have different requirements that I need. So I'm not going to have one hiking backpack. Same sort of thing with a virtual environment. I'm not just going to have one overarching, everything's just downloaded globally. I want to make sure that I can compartmentalize and be the most efficient that I can. In the same way of if I'm going to go hike Everest, I don't want to be carrying different things like sunscreen or things I'm going to need for Sedona versus, if I'm hiking in Sedona, I don't want to carry a Patagonia backpack or a Patagonia like puffy jacket and a really, weather intense jacket. I don't want to carry that stuff if I don't need it. So the same sort of thing happens with a virtual environment.
All right, I was just a little confused because when I install something into that virtual environment, I don't see the stuff that I have installed, that I installed on there. I guess I was just expecting, the Flask files and whatever to be installed in that same directory, but I guess it isn't.
No, yeah. So if we do a virtual environment, that is like a fresh slate, a clean slate that you can totally mold however you want it to be.
Okay.
Yeah. Great questions, though. Anybody else have any other questions?
So if that's installed in, say, that Hello Flask folder, will that then apply to any other folders also, like subdirectories, or do you have to install that in every
single folder? The idea behind it, in theory, is right. We could have, there's different packages and environment things that we're doing. We're deciding to use pipenv for this one. Kevin, if you can recall from Django, we had basically one, and it was kind of like our, overarching we always just activated this one environment for everything we do. In theory, you could do that for this class. You could have one Flask environment. If we didn't use pipenv, we could have one Flask environment and activate that for, every single assignment. The reason we're deciding to do a assignment, every assignment has a virtual environment, is because actually in the real world, when you're working with projects, let's say that you are working for a company and you guys get hired out and contracted to build these applications, right? Well, let's say you're juggling, okay, you have 3 clients and they all have different applications. Well, those environments are going to be different, right? They're going to have different dependencies. They're going to have different things that they rely on, different things that you're trying to do. Maybe one, you're also trying to like do some data visualization with that. So you download pandas or, matplotlib. You might have those things versus maybe one is also working in Django. They want to have this different ORM. They're all using Python, but they're all using different packages. And so the idea behind each assignment having its own environment is to kind of emulate that, right? With each project in the real world, you're going to have a different environment. And so here with each project that we're doing, we want to make sure that you practice, dealing with dealing with a new environment associated to your project, not just one overarching, because that's not going to be how it is in the actual real world. Even if you work at a company, you guys aren't contracted out, you might be doing different applications that just have different dependencies. So you might be the guy that works on, X, Y, or Z, but maybe one application for HR has a dependency, for one package, and one for accounting has dependency for another package, and you're working with both applications, they're going to have different dependencies. So that's why we're practicing having each project have its own virtual environment. But in theory, Kevin, for what we're doing, yes, you could have, like we did with Django, one virtual environment that was Flask and be good to go. But we're just trying to emulate real world sort of stuff.
Okay, the reason that I asked is I noticed, like, I'm on the last stages of Checkerboard now, and I have noticed that like the pip, well, what was it, file, pip lock, whatever it was, you said, those are not in there because I've just got Checkerboard stored in the Hello Flask directory. So yeah, I would need to go in and pip env install Flask into that folder.
So the issue is, and this is a confusing thing with pipenv, and is you cannot have a pip env, and that's something we're going to talk about today. You cannot have a folder that has an environment within a folder that has an environment. So therefore, your folder structure, like you cannot have your checkerboard within your Hello Flask. What you can have is like Ahmad had, was where he had fundamentals and then Hello Flask and then checker fundament and then, you know, checkerboard or HTML or whatever. And so you can have a Flask folder that doesn't have an environment. And then within that, you have each project, and each project has their own environment. Right now, if you have checkerboard within your Hello Flask, when you go to activate your environment, it's always going to default to the parent, which can then have some issues, because if your checkerboard assignment just as itself might not, like it, you know, if you were to just submit that one assignment, it doesn't have the dependency list that we're looking for and some other, you know, kind of metadata. And so we do want to, what I'm going to talk about today too is our folder structure, and making sure that we don't have, if we have a folder that wants to have an environment, that cannot be within a folder that already has an environment. Does that make sense? Does that make sense, Kevin? Might have lost you.
Sorry about that. It wasn't
Oh,
unmuting for
all
some
good.
reason.
All good.
So just take the folders that I have in Hello Flask and just put them back out into fundamentals, and that should be fine.
Yep.
Then.
Yeah,
Okay.
and then from there you'll run your pip env install Flask, and then each project should have your pip file.
Okay.
Great question. You guys are hitting all the stuff we're going to talk about today, which is awesome. Any other questions? Hey Mel, good to see you.
Hello. I was interested in a conversation that was happening on Discord. It was my understanding our like Flask applications will kind of in VS Code complain because Flask is in the virtual environment. And so you'll see like little red squigglies on VS Code, and we're supposed to just be like, and that the assumption is that it's because it's just not seeing that it's Flask.
Yeah, it's like, if you can remember in Flask when we have our terminal, right? You can do a new terminal, and that terminal is kind of separate from our current terminal, if that makes sense.
Yes.
And so what it's saying is, hey, you don't have this activated, but if we're running it from my actual terminal, so from my terminal, I put, you know, Python 3 server.py, well, that is where all the dependencies are. So it's totally fine. Yeah. So you can just kind of.
And on that note, there was a conversation going on about just little like red squigglies that were coming up, like when people were doing the checkerboard assignment, if they're trying to like render in Jinja something on the HTML template, it wasn't liking that. And so I was wondering, is that part of it? It's not seeing the dependencies from Flask, so it's saying like, hey, this isn't a CSS attribute. Like, is it? Do you know anything about that?
Do you have? I'll have to look at it.
I've got my.
Yeah, why don't you share your screen?
Let's see.
And then we can kind of look at that. What my assumption is maybe there's a percentage sign that's left.
Okay.
It shouldn't. The other thing is just testing it. Okay. So here, yeah, so this Flask, that little yellow, that's what that is. And then what are we seeing here?
Okay, so I think what everybody was talking about was like these little squiggles. Because I have it as, I mean, I hate to be giving out all this information, but essentially it was
okay. I think there's a legit video. There's a video that walks through it. So
okay.
Yeah. Okay, so what this, are you passing 1 and 2 through from your server.py?
Right here.
1 and 1. Row X 1, 2, and that is going to render templates hello HTML.
This guy.
Yeah. What I'm curious is because color 1 is working.
All of this works.
It works.
All of it
Can you
works.
hover over the red and see what it's saying?
Yeah. So this is it's a
Property
property.
value expected.
Yeah, sorry.
No, you're fine.
There you go.
Property syntax color. Yeah, I'm not sure. Yeah, it might just be a linter issue. If it works, then I would say,
Yeah. I just wanted to get your opinion on that because I think what happened was, you know, I just letting the discussion unfold because I thought it was like really beneficial. And obviously everybody's code's working like this, but I was like, is this just
Mhm.
because it's not seeing the dependencies from Flask? I think, and Peter, I don't know if, was it one of the solutions they someone brought in like HTML Jinja to their languages on their Emmet expressions? Was that?
Well, no, Christiani, he did some stuff with like .jinja files and stuff like that. And I don't know if they play any nicer. You could literally do a .jinja instead of a .html.
Oh, okay.
I don't know how nice those play relative. I posted a link to a thing that can semi-stop those underlines at least. And you can shut it off specifically like in the Python workspace, as opposed to shutting it off throughout your entire VS Code. So if you like, you know, right click and open your, say like your Python file, or through command prompt, you know, like code your Python file and open up like that entire workspace, just so everything that you're doing in Python is affected by that. You can actually go into VS Code and change your workspace settings specifically to turn off the linting for that exclusively within the Python workspace. So it's not like messing with everything else. That's the only workaround I saw. But yeah, I think it's just a bit of a weird thing, like you said, maybe where it's not detecting something. And it's what, because I looked up the error and it's pretty much saying like, I expect the CSS thing here. Like that's what it's saying. It's like, I expect CSS and I'm not getting it.
Yeah,
so,
it's expecting just some color, and then instead you're calling some color from your, I guess what I would say is linters can be interesting. They can be great, but they can be interesting. And so usually my default would be this is, you know, hover over your error, check your code, right? And if you're like, no, this absolutely works. Like in the sense of, I did this correctly, which we looked at it and we said, no, that should work. And then we run it. If it does work, then I would usually default that to more of like a linter error or a linter kind of confusion. I would be careful, just being transparent with messing with the different types of files. So like a .jinja versus a .html, because we are going to be doing some different things when we start working with templates, when we start working with some sort of like templates. This is just an example. Templates, this folder is a default. It is hard coded within Flask that it has to be named templates. And so with that, sometimes when you're dealing with different folders like that, and when we start modularizing, it might be looking for a specific type of file. So if we're doing a .jinja versus .html, that can cause some issues. Also with that,
.html also.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what I would absolutely encourage. And then also when you have a .jinja, if you try to do, you know, if you try to do like the apostrophe, like with Django, it happens a lot too. Like if you have Django HTML, if you do the apostrophe like that, it doesn't give you the boilerplate, and you miss a lot of metadata. Which actually isn't great because you're not telling it what language or what sort of like width equals device width. So if you're trying to create a dynamic web page, that doesn't work because it doesn't necessarily know what is that. So I would default to absolutely default to HTML. And then if everything checks out, your code is running how you expect it to run, and you still get these squigglies, then I would just, you know, kind of default that to a linter error.
That's great.
Christiani did figure out how to, well, one, made sure that .jinjas do render, which I'm not necessarily recommending it, but he did find out that they render, I guess.
Oh, all right.
Yeah, I was gonna say there it is. Okay. But and further, he figured out how to turn on Emmet abbreviation on different file types too. So even, you know, even if it's just a useful thing to be able to do that too. But
okay, so just to, I guess, continue on this, I did install an extension specifically for Jinja. The one that I found was called Better Jinja. That seems to be the one that has the that's more up to date, because I've seen some other ones, and you know, their last revision was like a few years ago.
Sure.
But it seems to work with the HTML files, with the Jinja code that we put in there.
Okay.
And as far as the extensions goes, I don't think that really matters too much, because you do specify the extension when you do render the template. So you have a full file name instead of just the file name without the extension.
Are you
So
talking about like as a .jinja?
yeah, so you know, you're still specifying that it's a .jinja or .html or whatever.
Sure, I was saying because people can take that and transparently, this is for people, especially that are starting out and aren't necessarily used to messing with code, right? And so they can take that and say, oh, I can name this other things, where there are hard-coded pieces in Flask, especially when we get to modularization. We start breaking everything out, and instead of just having a server PY, we have a users.py and a food truck.py, and we build out all of our models and our classes, and we build out everything with our database. Some of that stuff is hard coded, and so my encouragement is stick with the base things. If you would like to investigate .jinja, go for it. But for the, I would say 94%, 95% of the class, they should stick with the HTML if they don't have that understanding, right, of already a Jinja file and what is like a templating engine, and how that's working, and what are the back end stuff like that. That's kind of why I would say stick with the HTML. But if you are investigating that and you're really passionate, like obviously feel free to do that as long as it works, good to go. But for the majority of the group, just to transparently cut down on any confusion of like, well, what is it supposed to be, a Jinja or an HTML? I'm telling you, the group, stay with an HTML.
All right, it's just I guess in my mind, I needed to get rid of those squiggly lines, because as far as I know, I'm kind of error prone when it comes to coding, and I'd rather not have any false positives.
Sure. Okay.
Yeah, they're
Again.
annoying.
Yeah.
Especially because VS Code's like, hey, you have 3 errors on here. I'm like, no, I have none. And
I have 0 errors.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Sure, I hear that. Cool. Anybody else have any other questions while we're here in office hour? Had some pretty good conversation on environment so far. Did you guys get my This Week in Python email today? Perfect. Cool.
Yep.
Just making sure that everybody got that, and we are good to go there. Cool. How's development been going for you guys? How you guys doing? Doing all right? Where you guys at assignment wise?
I just got to checkerboard, I think.
I think what I forget where I'm at. I don't know. The first couple ones were just different.
The Flask?
I don't know. I feel like I was on a streak last week.
Yeah.
And then the dojo pets kind of messed me up. I don't know why, but I couldn't figure it. It was like too simple, and I was overthinking it, because I was like, this is definitely how you do it. But I was like, there's no way that's how you do that. That's going to be too easy. And then, so I kind of like did it, and you know, I played around with it for a while, and I just couldn't figure it out. So I ended up like checking like the solution. I was like, that was what I originally was doing. And I kept erasing it and doing something else, because I was like, there's no way. That's just way too.
Sure.
There's no way I understand it that well. Yeah, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
And
It looks like
so
you
I-
do, which is awesome.
yeah.
great.
So and then this first week's been a little bit different. You know what I mean? Even download
Yeah.
when you put everything on the on the when you make like a name for like the template, does it always have to be server.py to work?
No.
Can you can you change that to do
Yeah, I would no, well, actually, I think server.py does need to stay. I think I'm confused that with the database because yeah, you still need a server.py because even when we modularize it, we will modularize it out to where you have a server.py that runs. So yeah, I would keep it a server.py.
all right, and so that local 5,000 is it always local 5,000
Yeah,
every
that's
single
the
time, no matter what I do, and it's
Yep.
always based off of server.py?
You're spinning up a server, right? So remember, if you can remember all the way back to when we did web fundamentals, we talked about the request response cycle. That might have been your first or second day, to where you basically make a request in your browser. It goes to some server and our server handles it, whether it's retrieving data from a database or sending back an HTML, something of that nature. But a
Mhm.
server is handling it and it gives the request back to my client, right?
Mhm.
That's what we're creating, is we're creating a server so we can make requests via
Mhm.
localhost 5,000. And then from there, whether depending on the URL, it kind of filters our request, does whatever we want, whether it's HTML or some sort of database query or putting something on it, whatever we're trying to do, and then it
Mhm.
gives back to us whatever we have, basically.
So everything that we do in Flask, we're doing off that like one server.py.
No, sorry. Each project will have its own server.py. Sorry about that.
And
Each
you
project.
can save it. You can save it as server.py a bunch of times.
Mhm. Yeah,
let you
as
do
long
that?
as your folder structure is set up to where, let's say you've got, let me share my
Is that why
screen.
is that why they say do the templates file and then just do templates for everything?
Templates is a hard-coded thing. It's specifically looking, when you do the render template aspect, it is specifically looking for a folder within your project called templates. So that's why that is there. So let's come here. Let me
Real
find.
quick,
Because
Yeah.
the understanding routing, like I couldn't figure out how to make new ones without like deleting everything and then just like doing it in the same server.py, because every time I tried to like do like dojo.py to make like a new one for dojo, it just wouldn't work. I don't know if that makes sense or if anyone understands that.
Yeah, so let me
No.
share my screen.
you
So
can add like the
here,
whole. Oh,
real quick, Peter, and then I'll get to, so here I've got this folder called, where is it? Called Flask TA, right?
Mhm.
So within that, I can have, a new folder called test,
Mhm.
right? Let's say that this one's your checkerboard, this one's, another course I'm at Hello Flask, whatever. So Flask TA houses every single folder. Then within Flask TA, this, if I navigate to CRUD, that's where I create my environment. So I've got my pip lock whenever my environment's created, pip file, pip lock, and then I have my server.py, right? This server.py is only associated with this project.
Gotcha. Okay, that
Then
makes sense.
Then if I were to create and navigate into here, so let's say new terminal folder, right? I'm in that. If I say pip env install Flask. I'm installing Flask, right? And then I can say touch server.py. py. Touch just means create a file within this folder called server.py. And then I can say, you know, pip env is shell.
So you have to,
This is
you have to touch it every time?
Yeah, you have to create this file server.py. And then within that file, we will have all of this information. Sorry, let me get, I'm working on one screen today, so it's very hard
Yeah.
compared to what I'm typically doing. So
You have
then,
to, you have to pip3 install pip env every single time?
no, we pip3 install pip env one time.
Okay.
Every single time though, I do have to navigate to my
Have to
folder
install.
and then I have to install Flask. I do have to do that every single time where
And that's just right on
run
the
this
VS
guy.
Code, right? On the terminal on the VS Code?
Yeah, you can do it on terminal and VS Code, or you can do it within, I would encourage you to get used to this terminal.
Can you open that up again, just so I can see?
How
Sorry.
do I open this, is what you're saying?
Yeah.
Yeah, so do you have a Windows or a Mac?
I got a Mac. Oh, yeah, I got that
Okay.
little thing. Yeah, I got that.
Yeah, so
the
this guy
terminal.
right here. So just to kind of walk through this with you, I would, if I were you, you know, you can do command spacebar and it allows you to do spotlight search. You can say
Mhm.
terminal, right? And then once you do that, it'll come up over here, drag it to this middle. So it's always here on this dock.
Yep, I got that now, but this acts like the same thing as a regular, right? So I can just CD and like go
Yeah,
into my
mhm.
file. So that's how you
Yeah.
would do it?
Yeah, so I can CD into desktop, into Flask, Flask TA, into test. So now I'm within test.
Hmm.
And then here's where I would run, I already have done it, but I could run pip install, if I do it again, so I can break anything, pip install, pip env, install Flask.
Okay.
It's already invited, I already have it, so that's why, you know, you see that it's very low. Now, if I were to ls, you can see within this, it's got pip file, pip lock. Remember, I did touch. Touch just
Yep.
creates a file. So I touched, created a file. Now I can say pip env
Mhm.
shell, and this is going to activate my environment within just this folder. You can see it's called test right here. Now
Mhm.
my thing is, you know, activated. And then if I wanted to, let's say I have all this information. Let's go into MS server.py. I'm here, right? I save it.
Mhm.
Cool. Then if I come here and I say Python 3 server.py, it does this. Cool. So
Yeah.
now I don't have an issue, which means I'm good to go. So I can
Okay.
come over here, new local host 5000. You see hello world.
Yeah.
So I've
Okay.
spun up the server. Now my server is running.
Why did you have an 8,000?
That's what Django. So the different languages use different things. So if you use like React as the front end client, you're going to do localhost 3000. It's just kind of how the language is.
Okay.
Localhost 8000 was Django, which is a different, it's called an ORM in Python. That
Mhm.
one runs on 8000.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that seems easier. I kept
Yeah,
using the
and-
terminal on the bottom, but then I'm like killing terminals and stuff, and I'm like, I don't know which one this is going to, and I don't know
Yeah.
why one's working and another one isn't working.
Yeah. So making sure every single project has a server.py. Every single one
Okay.
must have a server.py, and that server.py must have some very important things. First off, it needs to import from Flask,
Yep.
which we have downloaded from my environment. It needs to import the class of Flask. Class of Flask, just kind of like how we had dunder init for my class as a name. So I'm using, this is that abstraction piece, right? We don't have to know what dunder is doing. I am just using that information as part of that abstraction from the OOP. Then
Mhm.
I'm declaring at this route. Now this route is whatever I have after localhost 5000,
Mhm.
right? So slash is the same thing as not doing anything, right? It defaults.
Mhm.
But if I were to say pizza, right? Well, first in my code, I would need to say pizza. Well, yeah, I'd have to say pizza here,
Yeah.
pizza, right? Then whenever, if I spun up my server and then I did localhost 5000/pizza, it would say, okay, cool, hello world, or
Yeah.
hello pizza, something of that
Yep.
nature. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yep. And then you have to have that last line too, right?
Yeah. And then we tell it what it's going to do. Remember, just like we were talking about a request response cycle, we're
Mhm.
requesting our server, we're requesting something, we're giving it this URL. And our server saying, okay, you gave me this URL. Let me see what I can give you back. Well, I
Mhm.
have this method called hello world. So I'm going to give you back hello world. Then at this last part is what helps it run to wherever app run debug equals true. So this is just a server. You have to have it. So you do have to have all of this. Now we're going to add different routes, right? To where I can do like a, what say I wanted to have like an app route of pizza, right? And then I can do something like this called like def pizza, doesn't take in anything. And then I can return I love pizza, right? I
Yep.
can do that. That's fine. And so now if I say localhost 5000, by default, it'll say hello world. If I say localhost 5000/pizza, it will return I love pizza.
Mhm.
So every single project you do with Flask will have a server.py. And for everything we're doing, we're going to do, for this week, we're doing everything within my server.py. Now, when we get to week 5, we're going to do what we call modularization. So we're going to take this bit and break it up into different pieces. But for right now, I just want you guys to understand how this works.
Okay.
Make sense?
Yeah. No. Yeah. It makes sense.
Perfect.
I
Perfect,
have a
perfect,
question.
perfect. Yeah, what's
Uh,
going on?
So it means the Flask is not acting like a server, like a web, like a database, right?
Mm-mm.
It's just whatever you have in the file. It's kind of in the between, and what you have, it shows that, right?
Yeah, so what a server will do is it's kind of like, you can kind of think about it like in traffic. You know, when like a street light's down or something and you have somebody directing traffic, right? So my server is going to do that. So basically, I'm going to give it some request. I'm going to pull up to the street light and it's going to tell me where to go. Or maybe if you've gone to like a concert or, you know, I go to the Mariners game sometimes. And so when you're in line, you have somebody and they go, okay, go to this one, go to this one, go to line 3 to get in, go to line 7, right? So what's happening is we are going and making this request to my server and it's deciding what we're doing. Either I'm going to, it's either going to, you know, take my request and give me back an HTML, or it's going to take my request and it's going to go and say, well, let me go talk to the database real quick and get, and, you know, give your request to the database or do whatever to the database. So then it goes to the database returns something and says, oh, talk to the database. It's giving me this back to you, something of that nature. So it's kind of directing traffic. It's the middleman. There's a great image that we're going to talk about in class for the overview piece, to where I'll share my screen real quick, just because I think it's a good image. Here, where it talks about our client, right, is making some sort of request via forms or via a button or an anchor, just something, right? Or just some URL. That request is going to come over here, right, into my server. My server is going to do something. It's either going to either give it back a template, or it's going to talk to the database and the database is going to give it something back. And then it's going to decide, I now give it a template /statics. Well, it'll always give a template /statics. And then it gives my client back some sort of response, right? My client makes a request, either add this to the database, retrieve this from the database, delete this from the database, or I want to see a new HTML, right? I click the home button, so I want to go back to my home. Doesn't need to target the database for that. The server will take that request, decide, okay, either I need to just send it back some sort of template, or I need to talk to the database database gives me something back, and then I give it some sort of value back. Does that make sense? So it's
Yeah.
just like the middleman.
Yeah, so in this example, the last example, right? Since we have not set it up as database, we just have the Flask, right? The server, right? And we are getting an answer from the server, like hello world or I love pizza, whatever, right? So can I say like Flask is like a temporary database or a small database, like even if we don't have our MySQL, which is one of the type of databases, right? As far as we have our file back files, right? Flask will take information from those files and then return it back. And also if we change the file paths, like the HTML file paths, Flask will not be able to get the answer back.
I would really caution you on thinking of Flask as a database. Flask is a server that directs what kind of response we get back. And so in theory, it is saving a list of responses, but it's not saving any sort of data. It's just the responses, right? It doesn't have any persistent data. Now, when we incorporate session, that is the closest thing that Flask has to a quote unquote database. It's where we save a little bit of information, usually within my browser, or if you can think about like cookies, if you know what cookies are, right? You save a little bit of information there, but I would really caution you on thinking of Flask as a database because it's not, right? It is a server that speaks to a database, maybe holds a little bit of information, but nothing like a database. I would just really caution you on thinking that way.
Okay, so now suppose if I created a very basic HTML, right? With some CSS and JavaScript, right? And I have all those files in a specific location. And I also have my Flask files, which will help me to get the answer what I have, right? And suppose if I change those files location, right? Will I face with any problem or no?
No, it's just a director, right? So let's say that I think if I'm hearing you right, is that basically, let's say that I say /pizza and it gives me back pizza, right? I have this entire thing that has JavaScript and CSS and HTML that I love pizza and it sends me there. But if in my server, I go and change the route name from pizza to broccoli, right? If I say /I love pizza, you will have an issue. But not because
not the route in the server, PY. Sorry for cutting you off. The files location, HTML, CSS, and JavaScript files, right? Suppose these files location currently, suppose I have in a simple HTML folder, right? And then later I change that. Still, will I get the whatever I have on those files or no?
No, you will specifically, if you're having any sort of HTML or static files, there are two names you have to have, right? So you can't change the files, whether it's, kind of whatever you're doing. It has to be like for your HTML, it must be within your project. You must have a templates, and it must be called templates. And with a lowercase t, you must have that templates folder. So you can't necessarily change them. Now, I can have an HTML within my project that I don't call upon. Right? Let's say I had a broccoli HTML, but I don't have an entire route at all that takes me there. That would work, right? It'd be fine. You're just, now you have bloat because now your code base is larger and you're maybe up, putting that on the cloud or something like that. So that's just something to think about.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Cool.
Thank you.
Well, yeah, I'm going to run to